Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Black Ducks. Today, we will welcome Ali. I recorded with Ali in the Black Ducks in Arabic version before. I will put some links if you want to check the Arabic episodes with Ali. This is me, Ismail Muhammad, from Cairo, and today we will talk about a very important topic. I think in Black Ducks, I'm trying to let you understand what really happening here in the Middle East and Egypt, and I'm trying to invite some people, some secularism, atheists, non-religious people in my show to talk about these topics, to explain exactly how we see as atheists, as secular people from this area, to explain many topics. I think it's very important for you non-Arabic speakers and West countries to know these topics from us by our explanation. Today we will talk about a very important topic. It is I think, in my opinion, it is all the problems here in the Middle East. I think it's related to this topic, and I will talk with Ali. And Ali, maybe you can check the description under the video. He is originally from Egypt, but he studies. He's students now in USA. He's American citizen, but he grew up in Egypt. We will start now, and I hope you enjoy this episode and this show. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and also follow me on Twitter and follow the Twitter account of my show. All the links you can find under the video. Let's go and start. Welcome, Ali. Welcome, Ali. I am happy to have you today with me in Black Ducks in English.
Well, I'm happier to be here. And as far as atheism and secularism in the Middle East go, I would say that you're probably the strongest outlet for people of our persuasion to get their ideas out and to talk to the general Middle Eastern public about these ideas and their importance, and how they can help us get out of the sad state that we find ourselves in today, and to contribute to the world and to our common good, instead of being such a burden on everybody else, whether it's terrorism or poverty, or just lacking behind in women's rights and education and health and almost every statistic of note. So your work is excessively important, and you do it very well. And I certainly appreciate listening to some of the voices that I've heard on your show, who would otherwise not even get a chance to see the light of day. You're obviously, I don't want to make you out to be bigger than you actually are or anything, but considering the environment that we live in, I believe that your effort is huge, and that it's certainly much appreciated from me personally, and from a lot of people who also are hearing these ideas for the first time, and we're grateful to you for that. And so I am definitely honored to be on your show.
Thank you, Ali. Let me ask you about, in your opinion, it's important to have this show in English language. Why, in your opinion, this is very important to talk in English in such a show?
Sure. So I think that it is important. I think it is important that we have people who live in the Middle East who are secularists and not necessarily atheists, but certainly atheists also, who can show the world that there is a way to get people who have grown up in the sort of brainwashing that we did, certainly you and I, can learn and can understand and can better themselves. And I think that the problems that people like us face in making society more like us, as opposed to more like the extremists and the religious zealots, is it's something that is doable. It's not impossible, and there are people working on it, and there are ways that people who are listening in the West can help the situation by mainly having voices like you and like people that you will bring on, hopefully with time, as opposed to the usual crew that comes on to talk about these sorts of things, which are usually Muslim clerics. They usually find a Muslim cleric to come talk about the Middle East's problems, when in fact really the solution for the Middle East problems will be secularism, and it will in fact be not getting a religious cleric to talk for people in the Middle East, but instead to have a representation that is more secular in nature, that has to do with the here and now and what we can convince each other and reason with each other about, as opposed to what jersey you happen to wear in terms of religion. And so I think that it's important that that these voices first off begin to talk, meaning you come on and you talk about it in English. And I think that it's also important that people in the English speaking world listen to to these sorts of voices, to voices like yours, and I hope many more that will come, as opposed to allowing the narrative to be dictated to us by people who are, at the end of the day, religious zealots. They might be different sorts of there might be more moderate or they might be more extremist, but really that's not the way forward, and it's not the way that people here live. And it's not, these are not Western values. These are values that people anywhere in the world can come to and reason themselves to. And some of us have, and we would like to convince more people that that's what they should do. And that starts by listening to the voices that you are going to hopefully put on view in English for Westerners to understand that they can support that. Those are not this is not some sort of, I mean, a lot of people think that it's imperialism or something like that for people in the West to push these values of secularism on people in the Middle East. And I think that we, as secular Arabs and Middle Easterners, need to stand up and say, no, we are secularists and we are Middle Easterners, and we are not imposing these values on. But considering the situation we find ourselves in, we should have a natural ally, meaning these people should help us in our efforts, as opposed to stand back and let the religious shut us down and hunt us down and throw us out of our countries and make it uncomfortable for us to live there, and which basically gives them free rule. They get to do whatever they want, because if any of us speak out, we get tossed out or killed or thrown in prison. And there are not very many intellectuals who are brave enough to talk about some of the things that you're talking about, which is, and not to say that you're not an intellectual yourself. I mean, I actually think that you are, but I mean public intellectuals, people who are in the public sphere, who are known by a lot of Egyptians. They don't dare talk about these things, and when they do, even they face severe consequences. Just recently, I forget the TV announcer's name on El Cojero and Ness. I forget his name. Islam something. He got a 5-year prison sentence that was later reduced.
Islam Bahiri.
Islam al-Bahiri, exactly. And now he's going to serve 1 year in prison. And the guy, Muslim by all accounts, and just criticized the orthodoxy. He didn't even go into, for instance, some of the things that you and I would say about what we think about religion. And so, you know, this is why I believe what you're doing is important, and it's even more important to do it in English. And I think that people listening should make an effort to support these views and to make sure that they stand with those who are for women's rights, who are for minorities' rights. You know, it's not like atheists are in Egypt even are calling for Islam to be banned or for anything like that. We're just asking for equal protection for everybody, atheists and Buddhists and Muslims alike. You know, not to have my beliefs and views punishable by a prison sentence, and maybe even we won't even get that far. I mean, I don't know if you know about this, but there was this guy Albert Saber who I know from you know is in Europe now, but at some point when he was in Egypt, he was chased by he had a lynch mob come to his house, and then he got arrested for blasphemy. You know, so this is the sort of absurdity that people in the West are willing to ignore in some sense because they think it's racist, or I don't know what it is, but there are people here on the ground who would like your support for the values that we both share. That we, you know, these are, again, so I will emphasize again, these are not Western values. These are human values that people can reason themselves to. I can reason that if I don't want to be treated badly as a minority, I should not be treating other minorities in a bad way. And that's what secularism is, right? It's not, I mean, I guess there are different flavors of secularism, but to a large extent, it's just protect everybody from some majority of believers, the mob, basically, so that they don't, you know, go lynch people who think differently than they do. And so that was sort of long-winded. So.
But let me ask you, do you think the communities of secularism, communities of atheists in over the world know about us today? Today there is many atheists in the Middle East and North Africa. You know, I recorded many episodes with Arabic and people from Middle East, from North Africa, atheist and non-religious and secularism. I recorded many episodes in Arabic version of this show. But do you think that communities of secularism out there in Europe, in America, the communities of atheists know about us? No, there is thousands of secularism and atheists right now in the Middle East and North Africa. They know about us, they or not?
I mean, I think that they don't understand to a large extent the situation that we're in, and I don't think that people understand the importance of at least of participation, of supporting these communities, and I think that to a large extent the reason is that even here in the West, secularism is constantly under attack. In the United States, for instance, there are many, you know, America is one of the most religious countries in the civilized world. And there are constant battles over abortion rights, women's rights, and gays' rights, and God in school, and God, the Ten Commandments on courthouses, and things of that nature. And even, this is supposed to be a secular country, but they have on "In God We Trust" on the money. So there are a lot of issues that still need to be taken care of in Western countries too. So even atheists here are usually living under siege in some sense of the word. Meaning they're also under attack. It's not as if atheists here have it, made or anything like that, or even secularists in general. People do want to bring their religion into the government. They want the government to say, these parts of my religion should be enforced by civil law, and people here have to battle that. So in a sense, they're sort of caught up in their own problems, but the thing is that we stand or we fall together in some sense, right? I mean, letting the extremists in the Middle East win by basically crushing us, people who are secularists, well, just it then makes them bigger, which in turn will turn the Christian extremists and the apocalyptic Christians over here to become even more radicalized and so on. I mean, we see the sorts of religiosity and the sort of religious language that people are using when it comes to the Middle East today. They're talking about let's kick the Muslims out. This is starting to sound like a religious war between fundamentalist Christians and Muslim and fundamentalist Muslims in some sense.
Yeah.
And this is sort of a global battle, and it needs to be fought, I believe, anyways, in my opinion, on all fronts. And it's much more dangerous to allow what's going on in the Middle East to go unimpeded, in my opinion. And I don't say, like they should ignore the problems that are here, but you should also pay attention to some of these other things that are happening. It's going to be very, very difficult to not be talking about, Christian values versus Muslim values in the not too distant future if things continue as they have been. And like I said, this isn't fantasy, right? We see Trump in the United States and what he's doing in this election, and we see what's going on in the Middle East and how they treat the secularists and so on. And so they don't. I don't think that they do give it the gravity that they should. I don't think that people in the West really do pay attention to what's going on in terms of the secularist movement and the atheist movement, particularly in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia, which you don't necessarily associate with atheism. But from what I understand, and I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for most of the people who have YouTube channels who are talking about this, our viewership is sometimes the largest in Saudi Arabia, even in some for some of them even larger than Egypt, which always surprised me anyways. And so there is something going on, and I think that people here need to pay more attention to it, and they need to figure out ways to support this sort of activity, because it is obviously having some impact. I remember the days when nobody was talking about it, and nobody would even dare talk about it. And I think those days are now sort of over, but there's a lot of room for backsliding. And if we don't get some support, I think that it's not out of the question that we could be shut down again. And then who knows when something like this will happen again. I don't know if they were able to effectively shut down all of this activity that has gone on in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure when it would be able to start again. I mean, this could be a long-term disaster if people don't capitalize on some of the momentum that we have going in our direction. I get the emails, I get the comments about people who have seen something interesting on the internet or whatever, and it's turned them into a secularist or an atheist or a less fundamental sort of a Muslim, which is perfectly fine. Nobody wants. Look, I don't want every Muslim to become an atheist. I don't care. That's not our goal here. Our goal here is that people of different backgrounds or people who have different ideas can talk about them freely. And if those ideas are wrong, then you know what? Let the marketplace of ideas, sort that sort of a thing out. As long as nobody's yelling fire in a theater, it should be permitted. I'm in that camp of freedom of speech. I'm sort of in the American camp in that sense, right? I feel like you can say whatever you want, as hateful as it is, and as much as I don't like what you're saying, I think that you should be able to say it. But as long as in return, I get to tell you that you're wrong. And that's basically all we're asking for. Not that, the Middle East should become atheistic overnight or anything, but at least allow us the space to talk and let people listen to our ideas. And hey, who knows? Maybe some of them, and I suspect a lot of them, will realize that it's in their best interest to view the world in terms of evidence and what we can demonstrate and agree on together. And that's all we need. All we need is just the opportunity to give that view. We don't want to force it on anybody. We don't want to, make it mandatory or say if you leave atheism, we want you to get your head chopped off. We just want the opportunity to talk and to let people listen and make up their own minds. And so, yeah.
It's not easy in the Muslim world. You are talking about something very simple. Anybody in the world today can understand what you're talking about, and it's really the basic of any society. But still, this cannot happening here in the Middle East, in the Muslim country. It's very hard. Even for some Muslims, you talk about Islam Bahari. This guy have a TV show. He is a Muslim, but he trying to reform Islam. Like Martin Luther King. Correct me if I am wrong. He trying to reform Islam to make a new version of Islam, but even that he banned. And he in the jail right now because he trying only to reform the Islam. What about atheists and secularism? I received many messages and many comments on my Arabic show. They were wondering why I am not arrested until now and Islam Bahari is arrested. And some people talking about I am working with the government, I am working with the security government, because of that I am not arrested until now in Egypt. So it's very weird here in the Middle East and Egypt and North Africa. There is many atheists, in Saudi Arabia. I have the most the number one views for my show. It's come from Saudi Arabia, Morocco and Egypt, and even Iraq and Syria. So there is many people out there in these countries, in these areas. They at least they are secular people. They are thinking in a secularism way, and they hope to convert, to try to convert their societies to secularism. But it's really hard here because nobody can talk easy. It's very hard here. Let us talking about our topic in this episode. I am for 27 years. I was believe that the human being come from Adam and Eve. I was believing in the story of the creation in the Islam and in other religious like Christianity, but after 27 years, I starting to watching some videos on YouTube about evolution. And this is maybe for the first time, because of YouTube, because of internet, I have a chance to watch these videos, scientific videos about theory of evolution. And this is all the media in the Middle East and Muslim country say that even some people working in the scientific field in the Middle East talking about the theory of evolution as a wrong theory, and it's not correct. And after when I saw the videos about theory of evolution, it shocked me, because I was believing Adam and Eve, and it was like a shock for me to watch this and to know about the theory of evolution and the history of human and on the earth. So I want to ask you, what is the main difference between the religious education or religious thinking and the scientific and evidence thinking? And in your opinion, is the Middle East as a culture right now walking in the religious thinking or the scientific thinking? And what about the West countries, America and Europe, and these countries and these communities? I want you to talk about this.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so here's the main thing to understand. Okay, the main thing to understand is that while about 40%, I think it is, of the American population, for instance, do not believe in evolution. They believe Adam and Eve and 7 days, and all that stuff that we were raised to also believe in the Middle East, and by and large, most people in the Middle East still believe these things. But this is not really all that important, right? Meaning, as far as I'm concerned, I would like if the general public was educated enough to understand the basics of science and be able to check and verify simple facts, especially about some of these big things, like where humans come from and so on. But look, if you can go and work as a gas station clerk, let's say, nothing against gas station clerks, but if you could go and pump gas for your entire life and believe that Adam and Eve existed, and it doesn't come into your life at all. You make no decisions in your everyday life as a mechanic that will really depend on whether or not you got the answer to that question right or wrong. Right? So I don't care, if let's say tomorrow 40% of the Egyptian population believed in Adam and Eve, and 40% said they didn't know, and 20% said they did. That still wouldn't be that big of it wouldn't really matter. What really does matter is the people who are working on this, the people whose decisions do depend on whether or not they get that question right or wrong. For instance, if you want to work as a research doctor, some sort of a medical field, you need to get that question right. You've got to understand where humans and the viruses that plague them and the bacteria that plague them come from, in order to be able to think clearly about the solutions to the problems you're trying to solve. And so, look, as long as the people who are doing that are free to go about it that way, meaning to look at the evidence and say this is right and this is wrong, then I don't really care what everybody, it's not really that important to me, because here's why. The reason is that at some point, the right view, the right point of view should start to yield answers that are different than the wrong worldview. And if you want to make progress, you want to make medicines, you want to make medical devices, one of those two is going to help you and one is not. All right. And eventually that will work itself out and people will recognize, as long as people who think this have the freedom to think it and the freedom to do the research that they would like, then, well, whatever the general public thinks is up to them. Okay. Now, I think that we need to do that because obviously, where do we get the money for the research? Well, it's from the general public. And so we need to convince them that what we found out is true so that they would continue to support us. In the Middle East, you not only have an overwhelming majority of people who don't believe in scientific theories, meaning it's upwards of 90-something% that believe evolution is wrong. And you know, I don't know, I gave you the link for the Pew poll, and people can go through that list and you can clearly see the sort of an understanding that the public has. But on top of that, never mind, you know, forget about the public, okay? Let's just talk about the people who are in universities and so on. These are the people that really should, that it's important for them to have the freedom to think about things and suggest answers and go and test these answers, right? These are the people who it's important that they get to do what they think is proper. And the problem in Egypt, at least, is, as far as I can see it, is that those people are controlled by the religious authorities, meaning some doctor or some professor or some thinker has an idea, has a belief, they want to talk about it. So they write a book or they write an article or something like that, or they teach it in the class. And what happens is one of these Muslim clerics or the extremists go and they sue the guy. And then we have things like this guy might get divorced from his wife and kicked out of the country, or might get thrown in jail or something like that. And this does happen to a lot of people. Okay, you can get sued by just anybody if you merely talk about something that goes against the religion. And so the people who it's important that they be able to talk about and think about all these great ideas like evolution and the Big Bang and so on, and all these great ideas that have gotten us where we are today. You notice that these same people have no problem using the iPhone or the GPS. But if you start to talk about the Big Bang or quantum mechanics or evolution or some stuff like that, they start to have serious problems. And so that I think is why the Middle East is so messed up. It's because the brightest people in those societies are controlled by some of the worst in that society. You know, so the way that I like to explain it to people is, look, you know how the college system in Egypt works, and it's different in the United States, so we should explain it a little bit. So in Egypt, when you get out of high school, you are evaluated, so you get some percentage, you know, that you got in your high school career. And the colleges and universities accept people into different professions based on the percentage that they got in high school. So, you know, usually medicine is like really high. You know, to get into medicine in Egypt, you have to be in like the 98th percentile. I don't know, it might even be higher than that. I'm not sure. Ismail can tell us more. If you get, you know, if you want to be a business major, you know, you only need to be, I don't know, something like 60% or whatever. If you want to be a religious cleric, you can be basically a chimpanzee, you could be the what is it, like 50% or something? I don't know. What is it, Smail? Do you know what it is? For Al-Azhar, مثلا?
You don't need. I think you don't need anything. You just
don't
go
need
and
anything, right?
yeah,
So then these people who are decided underachievers, let's just say politely, are telling the engineers and the scientists in your society what they can and cannot talk about. Otherwise, they're subject to being thrown in jail or attacked by a lynch mob or divorced from their wives and kicked out of the country. I mean, this is the sort of thing that we have going on. Is we have the people who are just the bottom of the barrel in terms of their education and their understanding and their and their so just generally the sorts of people that you would not want telling you what to do. At least me, anyways, here in the West, I would not, if scientists were being controlled by people like, Jerry Falwell, let's say, we just would never get anywhere. Jerry Falwell is like Al-Huwaini, for instance, in Egypt. That this is the sort of, this is not a good, this is not a good plan for a society to improve itself. And that's why it's so bad and so intractable. And I think that really the key is that people have to stop respecting these religious authorities and religious laws in general. And that until that is the case, until people like us are successful in convincing our fellow Arabic speakers that it is in their best interest that their laws are based on reason alone. You cannot bring your religious text or your religious cleric or your mullah or whatever into this conversation. Okay? If you want a law, you have to convince us that there exists enough evidence that this law is necessary and effective in fixing the problem that you've outlined, again with evidence. You can't just say my invisible friend told me that women are half of men, and now all of a sudden we need to treat women as if they were half a human being. That this is not an argument. And so that's my understanding.
I agree. I totally agree with you. But you must know, and I think you know that not even the scientific field or scientific rule that religious control it. It's even the politics. They control everything. Even our constitution, our law, the religion. It's in everything in our countries, in our communities. They control also the politics. And the politics man in our society. There is many problems, and I hope to improve my English to start to explain everything exactly like what it's happening is here. I want to ask you, when we talk about something scientific like evolution and anything. They start talking about Quran in our communities, and they believe that all the scientific rules, all the scientific theories, we can take it from the Quran. In your opinion, how can we consider the Quran as a scientific book? I don't know what's happening in USA, what's happening with the Christian people and Christian dogma and Christian religion in the West countries. But here in the Muslim world, all the people, all the communities, they deal with the Quran like a scientific book. What do you think about that? Can we consider the religious books, the holy books, like Quran, like Bible, as a scientific books? Yes or no, or and why?
Well, I mean, they're not. Just as the short answer is no, they're not scientific books, and it's clear that they're not scientific books. And most reasonable Christians, at least, will tell you that the Bible is not a scientific book. It's a book of stories and metaphors, or things like that. They don't believe that this is a book that you should have on your laboratory shelf. If you go into your lab, you don't need the Bible sitting right there. And most, like I said, most reasonable Christians will tell you that. Now, whether or not the Quran is a scientific book is, again, it's clear it's not a scientific book. However, most Muslims don't think that. Meaning, most Muslims, at least if you go by polling, they think that this book is a literal truth, and that it does, by implication, contain scientific facts. Meaning, if you think that this book is literal, the words are actually what they mean. They're not just metaphors or stories. That they actually mean, burn the atheist. They don't just mean some metaphor like, the atheist will be uncomfortable or something. That it is scientific. If you believe that it's literal and that it's 100% true, then it does make scientific claims, in my opinion. But it doesn't really matter what my opinion is. I don't really think that there is an Islam as one thing, and that is an Islam. I don't think that's actually true. I think and it's not true. It's clearly not true, because if it was enough, then Muslims themselves would not be defining themselves as different subcategories of Muslims. For instance, what I would call Muslim would include Shiites and Yazidis and all those different Quranists and so on. What, for instance, somebody in Egypt would consider Muslims is a completely different subset. Meaning, it's just the Sunnis. The rest of them are not exactly Muslims if you ask a Sunni Muslim, and they will tell you that they call themselves a Sunni Muslim. This is a label that they put onto themselves so that that they're not a Shiite or a Yazidi, right? And the same thing goes for the Shiites and the Yazidis and so on. And so, as far as I'm concerned, there is no Islam, right? The Islam is defined by Muslims. What are Muslims doing? Okay? And again, like I just said, that since there's not really one group of Muslims, there are sort of several different groups of Muslims, and they all kind of believe different things, right? They wouldn't call themselves different names if it didn't mean something. The reason that the Sunnah call themselves Sunnah and the Shia call themselves Shia is because there are actual differences, right? Not just in the story, meaning, these guys like Ali more and these guys don't like Ali more, or whatever it is. That's not just it. There are actual real consequences, like how do you pray, for instance, or should you stone the woman or should you whip her, or what? There are actual things that differ, and so that's why they need these different labels. And as far as I'm concerned, that is what Islam is. It's what the Muslims, the people who believe it, think it says. I have no dog in this fight. I don't care what Islam says. It's not really important to me. I don't believe it. As far as I'm concerned, it can mean whatever. I don't care. But what do Muslims believe? Okay, that's the important part here. And Muslims, at least in Egypt, for instance, are consistently very, very extreme by Western standards in their views of what Islam is. And they do believe that the Quran is scientific, meaning they do believe that it has predicted scientific theories before we found them using the scientific method. Now, there are several problems with this sort of thought, right? I mean, obviously, the most obvious is that this is post hoc, right? They didn't come before the theory and said, hey, look, in my book, it says that the Big Bang happened, and we should now go and do an experiment to show that the Big Bang happened. This is not what happened. What happens is that scientists go and they do these experiments and they put these hypotheses and they test them, and over time, finally, we start to go, okay, we think this is what happened. And then we have to fight the religious people for a while because they don't believe us, right? So then we have to convince them that it is actually true and this is actually what happened. And then after all that, they go, oh, well, hey, look, we found it in our book anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you know, only if everything was that easy. We have to drag you kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
And then you're going to tell us that it was in there all along. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just not going to cut it. Look, if you want to make this claim, then you've got to show us something beforehand. You've got to take your book into the lab and go, you know, here's the theory in my book, and here's the experiment that we're going to do, and so on. That never happens, and I predict. I don't know that this won't happen, but I predict that it never will. And you know, I could be proven wrong. That's always a possibility, but it hasn't happened so far. You know, no religious text was taken into a lab and came out with any useful scientific theory of any sort. And so Muslims do believe it, but they believe it in error. It is an error on their part to think that the Quran is a scientific book, and it's an actual serious problem. I mean, I think that it is a real problem because it muddies the water. You know, look, you can do that with any book. You can go post hoc and find any evidence for something after after you've already figured it out, and find it in some book or another. Right? I always say that you can read a cookbook as in that way if you like, you know, a book of cooking recipes. But it's meaningless. It's meaningless, and the problem is that if you actually think that this is legitimate, and this book has some other nonsense, and then you go and you follow this other nonsense, then you know you can get into some serious trouble, right? I mean that's really the issue here. It's not whether or not the Quran was right or wrong about Adam and Eve or evolution. It's, well, are you going to use this information to then tell me that for all eternity we should punish people who leave Islam, or that we should treat women as half equals? If you want to go and you want to make this book, and I don't mind. I mean, look, if you can believe in your head that the Quran actually tells you that Adam and Eve is a metaphor for evolution somehow, and you can convince yourself that the Quran has evolution in it, okay, fine. That's your business. I don't. That's, you know, I have no problem with that. And as a matter of fact, I would prefer it. Okay, but as long as you don't then use that to tell me that the rest of the Quran must also be valid. You see what I'm saying here?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's definitely not a scientific book, as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's really hard to explain this for our communities. In our schools, I don't know what's happening exactly in the West countries and the modern countries. In our schools, we have a serious problem. We have religion lessons in the schools. In this lessons, the teachers teach the students and the children about many things in religion, believing in angels, believing in shaitan, and all of this. And in the same school, there is a class for science like physics, like biology, like geology. Do you think it's good? It's good for the children to study both of this, you know, in the lesson, they teach the students there is angels, there is shaitan, and maybe the shaitan can control you, can control your life, can make some things to you in your life. And in another class, they teach the students about some things and some theory and some basics of science. It's good for the students, it's good for the children, or this makes a conflict for the children. For me, I was a children, I was a student in the school. I have religion lessons, and I think the it makes conflicts, and very conflicts for me, and many topics are integrated with each other, because I was believing in the story from religion, many stories from the religion, and it's conflict. It's really conflict with the scientific books and the scientific basics. It's easy for children to study both of this material or this subjects in the schools, yes or no, and explain this for us. I hope I explained the question.
No, I think you did. I think you explained the question quite well. Yeah, of course there's a conflict. Of course there's a conflict, especially the way that it's done in Egypt. You know, I don't really know very much about a lot of the other Middle Eastern countries and how their education's run, but I assume it's not that much different from Egypt. And it's terrible, of course, because you're right that it is taught as fact that we live in what has been called the demon-haunted world, right? Where there are magic and demons behind every corner, and you know, in every dark spot there lies a jinn or an angel or whatever, or a devil. And this sort of magical thinking is, of course, very damaging. And it can take years. It took me years personally to grow out of this sort of living in this, you know, fantasy-filled world where really, why would you do science, right? If everything is so arbitrary, and at any point, you know, you can get a demon somewhere and they can change everything. What the hell is the point of doing science?
You grow up with you grow up like me, Ali. You grow up in Egypt. You study religion. I think yes, like me.
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
of course. I remember very clearly. I went to a private school, and there was a lot of Christian kids in my school, and I remember clearly being separated during religion class. You know, all the Christian kids, because there's only about 5 or 6 of them in my class. They got up and they left with their priest, and you know, we sat in the classroom with the sheikh. And you know, of course, these were not geniuses. These were not brilliant men with wise philosophy to teach. These were very crude and ignorant people who taught you some of the stupidest things and some of the most damaging things that I've ever learned in my life. You know, a bad idea can be more damaging than no idea at all. Because it can take you much longer to get rid of the tentacles. You know, they sow this sort of thinking into you so deeply that it's hard to get away from it. And like I said, you know, I came here, and it was I had a great opportunity to wash myself of that thinking. I have much more respect for people like you who've never left Egypt and have somehow been able to get rid of this sort of a magical thinking, because everybody thinks that way. You know, it's not you. There are no scientific communities in Egypt. Even some of the most educated people will tell you some of this nonsense.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to say something and let you continue. I would like to thank I would like to thank YouTube, because of YouTube I watch many videos about science. I would like to thank also Professor Richard Dawkins I would like to thank Christopher Hitchens also, because of these people, because of their activity and your activity, Ali. Even I was a fan for your channel. If you don't know that. Because of this, all of this YouTube and Professor Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and even you, Ali, I became like I am right now. Can you continue right now?
Yeah, well, be careful mentioning me in the same company with Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, because clearly two of those are way better than the other one. I'm not going to say
my English is very bad, and I start learning English from maybe 3 years ago or 2 years only, and it was hard for me to understanding what Richard Dawkins say, what Christopher Hitchens say, but you are talking in Arabic, so it was very easy for me to understand.
Yeah, so that was, and by the way, you're obviously being very generous and very kind in saying that, and clearly the impact that you've had is way beyond anything that I could even aspire to be able to affect, but the reason that I started to talk about these things in Arabic was because of just what you said was. These ideas that they're not new ideas, okay? They're not some like great breakthrough that we've made. These are ideas that have been around for a while now, and we've just been very ignorant about them. And so, the ideas that Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and a lot of these people and a lot of even the old philosophers and Nietzsche and so on. All these ideas moved me tremendously, and I wish that when I was young, I had heard some of these ideas. It might, so you mentioned at the beginning of the show that I'm a graduate student. I am 29 years old now, and I'm my first year graduate student. It took me a long time to get rid of this magical nonsense, and I just needed a small opportunity sort of to get me moving in that direction. And I just wished that there was at least that option in Arabic, and so as bad as my Arabic is, and it's bad, I will admit readily, it's bad when you're trying to talk about big ideas. If we're going to sit down and have a coffee,
Exactly.
it's pretty good. Yeah. But if we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about serious ideas and science and things, it becomes very difficult for me. But I felt like somebody had to take these ideas that have been around for a long time now and just say them in Arabic. I mean, it was at least, even as bad as my Arabic was, I felt like it was useful. And, if in some way I helped get you involved, even if it's a tiny, small way, I am over the moon proud of any role that I had to play in something like that. But anyways, let's stop patting each other on the back. Yeah. And I don't know what were we just talking about before we got.
I forget the question. I was talking about the conflicts. What's conflict between science and religion? What's happening for the children when they study religion and science in the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and by the way, so in Egypt specifically, I have had I don't want to say the pleasure, but I have seen some of the classes that the engineers and the doctors, for instance, because there are really no scientists in Egypt, right? I mean, even the people who study the sciences are education majors. These are the people who are going to go out and teach physics to engineers or to future doctors or something. They're not going to be doing any actual physics research. And even the physics that they teach to their engineers and to their doctors, and not just the physics, but the chemistry and the biology and so on, is very, very dumbed down. It's not very rigorous. It's not what, for instance, we would have here in a school, right? You'd have to take actual physics classes with math and things like that. And they don't do that in Egypt, at least as far as I can tell. And I think that those two things are not entirely separate, meaning the fact that we teach religion in school in Egypt and the fact that our sciences are so dumbed down as to be practically useless are not entirely separate phenomena. And I think that the reason that they're not is that they really are, they come from the same sort of place, right? It's a place that says that knowledge that is about like the Big Bang and evolution and things like that, that these are things that are destructive. And that is the view for a lot of Egyptians, right? Is that these, and I think, you know, I don't know how it translates exactly, but they say that this is knowledge that does not help, right? They want to know how to build a machine or how to administer medicine. They don't want to talk about the beginning of the universe or the beginning of humanity. And the reason is they already know the beginning of the universe and the beginning of humanity. They've got it in a book, right? And that's the same book that they teach you in religion class. So they can't go teach you this book in religion class and then turn around and tell you any real physics or biology about evolution and the Big Bang, because, well, they just told you what their answers were, and those are the answers that are right for all eternity. And so if they don't teach very good science, and that's, you know, I think it makes it less confusing in a sense, but more confusing in another sense. So yeah, you don't have the conflict between the Big Bang and oh, let there be light, or between evolution and Adam and Eve, but that's because we didn't teach you about evolution and the Big Bang, right? That's why you don't have that conflict. Right? So in that sense, it's not as confusing because I didn't tell you one thing and then tell you another thing. But in another sense, it's very confusing because it makes you live in this magical world, right? Where you really, it's, you know, nothing you do matters, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, some magic is going to happen and it's going to throw all this stuff into question, right? At some point, Muhammad's going to come back. Right, and trees are going to start to talk again, and rocks are going to not again. Trees are going to start to talk. I don't know if trees have ever talked, but trees will start to talk, and rocks will start to talk, and all this magic will happen, and none of this science will matter anyway. Because, well, shit, if you've got a talking rock, why do you need lasers? Why do you need to, you know, why do you need to do this? Magic is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's a big part of it. I think that just this idea that that there is this one right book and that no other way is the right way, which is, by the way, like I said, as I gave you the link to the Pew poll, I don't know if you put it in the description field, the poll that I sent, that shows 84% of Egyptian people think apostasy, the punishment should be death. 74% believe that the Quran is the only true word and that it's 100% true. 74% believe that it should be only one religion. They believe that the same laws, that Muslim laws, should apply to everybody, not just Muslims. This is to me what being a Muslim, what Islam means, right? Islam means what most of Muslims believe. And if 70, by the way, 20% of the Egyptian population is Christian. So when I say 74% believe that Sharia law should be imposed on non-Muslims, we're talking about over 90% of the Muslim population, right? It's 74% of the Egyptian population, but 20% of that population is Christian. So 74% is about 90-something% of the, about, 98% or something like that. 92% of the Muslim population believe this to be true. And as long as that is the case, and that's that's how it works, there's no hope for any children being educated in any way that is that's going to help the Middle East out of its current problems. So yeah, obviously, clearly, it creates a generation of people who will not be very productive in science, which is the only way that we're going to move forward.
Yeah, you talk about something. You talk about something very important about the questions or created the questions. The religion is answer everything. I don't need to looking for any answers. I don't need to create questions or put some questions. The religion is answer anything, everything to you. The most important thing I learned in the last 3 or 4 years is about the questions. It's maybe more important than the answer, and this maybe this how science working. I must put questions. I must looking for not only the answers. I must looking for creating questions. How you can talk about that? How you can talk about in the religion everything is have an answer and ready answer for you, and in the science it's really different. You must create questions. You must ask all the time, because maybe the questions it's the most important thing to know more about many things happening in our life, in the real life.
Yeah. So, far be it for me to tell people, what science is. Of course, there are many people who talk about, what the scientific method is and so on in much better terms than I can. And so I'll leave that to those people. But I will say this. That what you're talking about is skepticism, and that's not necessarily a scientific thing, right? Being skeptical is something that you should be using everywhere, not just in the laboratory, right? And the example that I always like to use is, imagine somebody wants to sell you a bridge in Guatemala, and they tell you, hey, give me $10,000 and I'll sell you this bridge, which brings in $1 million a year, and it has all these things and so on. And you live in the States or in Egypt or something. What sort of evidence, how skeptical are you going to be of this person's claim that they actually own a bridge in Guatemala, and that second that they can sell you this bridge, which is going to bring you all this income, and whether or not this income actually exists? And there's a lot of questions that come into mind when some proposition like this comes up. It has nothing to do with science. This is just an everyday decision, and people in Egypt have to make these decisions all the time, and they immediately they know to ask a million questions before they give you a 1 pound. They're not giving you 1 pound until they have asked you 1,000 questions about what they're getting, and what evidence there is for the existence of such item. But then all of a sudden, you start to ask questions about religion, and they don't want you to ask them anymore, right? And that you run into serious problems when you get into this place where you're not even allowed to pose a question, right? And that's the situation that people find themselves in the Middle East. I mean, even on major Muslim scholars on major Egyptian television channels will come out and tell you that you just shouldn't ask some questions. And this is a perfectly acceptable answer to a lot of people, to what people like us bring up, like how did the universe get? How did the God make the universe? That's a question that people will just say, well, that's not for you. That's not for us to ask. And you're right that the only way that we advance our knowledge is by asking questions. How am I to know what's right and what's wrong if I'm not even allowed to ask the questions that will allow me to test whether or not something is right or wrong? And so it's not just science. It's not just when we're talking about claims that have to do with the natural universe. It's economics. It's everything, right? Everything. I mean, I guess economics is material too. So I guess everything is science in that sense. But in the Middle East, and in Egypt in particular, because that's the country that I'm familiar with the most. But I can tell you that from what I see from Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Muslim country, the Middle Eastern countries, Muslim majority countries, are the same way. Some questions are just off limits, and that. I mean, that is just a recipe for disaster. Okay, you cannot tell people that is the best way to fool yourself into believing a bad idea. If you can't ask, where is the evidence that something exists? Where is the evidence that these demons, these jinn, exist? Where is the evidence for this? If you can't even ask these questions, or if you're asked them, you're expected to just believe them as as truths without any evidence, then how are we to differentiate between what claims are right and what claims are wrong? And that's precisely the situation that we have in the Middle East. So I don't know if that answers the question. I'm not actually sure that I did, but that's okay. All right, that's my opinion on what why it's a problem to say that questions are not allowed, or to accept that there's just no answer and you have to accept it anyways. Look, if there's no answer, then there's no answer. I don't have to accept anything because there is no answer. And that's a major, and actually that's, I think, one of the biggest problems in the Middle East is getting people to understand that having no answer at all is better than having the wrong answer, or an answer that you can't question. It's much better to have to say to somebody when they ask you, how did the universe get here? Much better to say, I don't know. That is an open question. Than it is to give the wrong answer, or an answer that you have no evidence for. Because then, like you said, then you don't look for an answer, right? If you've just believed something without any evidence, then if you've got an answer, why are you going to continue looking for an answer? And so having a false answer cuts off the way to the actual truth. I hope that's clear. I think it is for most people anyway.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I received the questions from Amr Abu Talib. Amr Abu Talib asking you, Ali, about which is easy for Muslims, or which is easy for Muslims to leave Islam. Is talking about the conflicts between religion and science, or talking about or talking about Islam itself, and talking about the mistakes in this religion and nonsense in this religion. What's easy for a Muslim to leave Islam?
Yeah, well, I think that they're sort of connected, right? Because, well, look, how are we going to evaluate the claims of Islam, right? I mean, you're right that we should talk about the claims that Islam makes, right? We should concentrate on the actual stories of Islam that people believe, and the actual laws of Islam that people believe, and talk about those. But if what we're doing is we're trying to show that they're incorrect, well, how are we going to do that? For instance, how do we talk about the claims that Islam makes in terms of Adam and Eve? Well, we're going to have to start to talk about what we actually know about how humans got here, which is science, right? And so to examine the claims of Islam, in a lot of cases, we are going to have to use the scientific method and what we know from science to talk about it. And I think that is a very effective way to get people to leave Islam, if that's what you're trying to do, is talking about the actual specific claims that Islam makes. And in fact, you can even get more specific than that. For instance, you can go after the specific claims that the Hadith makes. In my opinion, the Quran is very general, and sometimes it's difficult to go after specific claims. There are some specific claims that you can go after, but you'll find that you have to use tafsir, tafsir ibn Kathir or something like that, which does rely on hadith, right? And so it's hard, as far as I can tell anyway, to criticize or to go after specific claims in the Quran, for instance, without having to resort to hadith. So I think that it's actually really, really effective to go after specific claims in the hadith and in the tafsirs. But again, I think that the way you do that is by giving people the scientific answer, the one that we actually do know, right? You're going after Adam and Eve, and the reason is because look at all this progress we've made using evolution, right? That's the argument that you're going to make. At least that's the argument I'm going to make. I don't know what the questioner had in mind, but I think that those are not mutually exclusive. I think that you can go after specific claims in the Hadith and the Quran while using science to show how those things are not true or they're not good.
I would like to thank you, Ali, for being with us today in Black Ducks, and I hope to invite you in the future in more episodes. And I'm enjoying today with you. And don't forget, for everyone watching us, to subscribe to our channel to receive the new events we made. Next week we will have an episode with Full Sayab from Iraq. She being with me before in the Arabic version of the program of the show, and the next week we will talk about a very interesting topic. Wait for us. Follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google Plus to receive the new information about the new events. If you want, I want you to if you want to talk something or about the Black Ducks at all, what you can say about the Black Ducks at all for our viewers.
Yeah, so I would suggest that people who are interested in seeing the state of Arab atheism, to go on your Arabic channel and just take a look at some of the statistics. How many views you have, how many subscribers you have, and recognize that this is important work, and that the support that you get, that I hope that you will get, obviously it's been difficult for people in the West to find something to support in the Middle East, but I think that there is a real option now, and I think that that option begins with a show like yours, and that people really should begin to support these movements and to support specifically your program and others like it that I hope will become more numerous in hopefully not too distant future, and that it's really, really important. And if I know that it's difficult for people who don't speak Arabic to be able to understand what all these shows were about, but I can tell you that it is impressive, even to seasoned atheists like myself, to listen to some of what Black Ducks guests have had to say in the past. A lot of episodes about the Quran and a lot of the myths that surround it. The Quran is seen as this magical book with magical linguistic powers. And I remember seeing a series of episodes you did with what I would call a literary critic, Sammy, I forget his last name, where he just destroys any notion that this is a special literary book. Over and over again, many examples of this sort of thing. And I just found it incredibly effective. And you can tell that it's effective. People, the Muslims are the clerics, the mullahs, the sheikhs are very upset with this. They're not happy about it, and that's how you know you are making good progress. And so it's very important that this show is supported, and that hopefully that it gets bigger and is the start of even more of these things. So, I am grateful to just listen and learn. You have a lot of very interesting people with a lot of very interesting points of view, especially a lot of the women that you have on. I feel like it's probably one of the only places where you will hear strong Arab women talking about actual equality, not this lip service that we get from some of the Muslims about how it's somehow equal to give women half the rights of men, how that's somehow fair, about real equality and asking for women's rights outright. And I find that very, very good. Very good in quality and in efficacy. It's very effective, and it's very enjoyable. I enjoy listening to it, certainly, and I know a lot of other people do as well. And with a little bit of support and help, hopefully from our comrades, as Hitchens would say, in the West, it might even get better than that. And so I would just encourage people to subscribe to even both channels, even if you don't speak Arabic. And every now and then just go on and translate some of the titles, what the title of the episode is, and you'll recognize how provocative some of the stuff is, considering that this is supposed to be a backward society, ignorant and not very educated. That there is hope, and there are people who are a very, very, very high caliber in terms of their education and their intellect. And I appreciate it. I think it's a great voice, and it's one that should be considered along with the regular voices that we always hear of the religious, usually the Muslims and the Christians in the Middle East. But that's what I have to say about the Black Duck show, and it speaks for itself. And hopefully, with the more English shows that you'll make, people will be able to see that clearly.
Yes, I will do more and more English content for all non-speaking Arabic fans or viewers or watcher. Thank you, Ali, for being with me today, and thank you everyone for watching me to the last minute and waiting for more and more of guests in Black Ducks in English in the very near future. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Smain. Thanks for having me.
Bye bye.